Good evening and welcome to Metro Focus. I'm Jack Ford. With his son on the hot seat in front of Congress for conversations he had with Russians during the 2016 campaign, and as a push in the House to impeach the president is squashed, another big question has emerged, and that is, can a president of the United States be guilty of obstruction of justice? That is the hot issue in Washington legal and political circles right now in light of a controversial tweet posted by the president. The tweet came after his former national security advisor, Michael Flynn, pled guilty to lying to the FBI about his contacts with Russians. The day after the plea, the president tweeted, quote, "I had to fire General Flynn because he lied to the vice president and the FBI." Now, Democrats say that that tweet suggests that the president knew Flynn had committed a felony when the president fired FBI Director James Comey. James Comey claims that President Trump pressured him to end the Russia probe before firing him. And that, say some Democrats, could amount to obstruction of justice. But the president's lawyer, John Dowd, immediately shot down any such speculation, telling online news site Axios, quote, "The president cannot obstruct justice because he is the chief law enforcement officer under the Constitution and has every right to express his view of any case." Dowd also claimed it was he and not the president who drafted the controversial tweet, which raised even more eyebrows. So, what does this all mean, and what are some answers? Joining us now to untangle all of this, WNYC legal analyst, host of All Things Considered, and my good friend for many, many years, Jamie Floyd. It's so good to have you here with us.
Good to be here, Jack.
So let's turn this into a law school classroom, if we can, for a moment. You and I have lived through
a high-level class.
We've taught in them. Let's start with the notion of obstruction of justice. Now, there's some things in statutes that are very specific and precise about obstruction of justice, but other parts of it are fairly expansive, or elastic, if you would.
Right.
Give us kind of a working definition of what obstruction could mean.
All right. Well, let's keep it simple. Congress has passed laws on obstruction of justice. There are federal laws on obstruction of justice, and it's pretty clear that a president can obstruct justice. And for these purposes, it's essentially interfering with an investigation or impeding the administration of justice. And we've seen it in modern cases of presidents. And the two I'll point out are 1974 President Richard Nixon, the Watergate scandal, and more recently in our memories, most of our viewers, Bill Clinton. And those were impeachment cases. The separate question is, can you prosecute criminally a president for obstruction? Because impeachment, of course, is a political process.
And impeachment, essentially, we've been told there's some words in the Constitution, treason, bribery, high crimes, and misdemeanor. But essentially, we've been told in impeachment situations, it's whatever Congress says it is at the time.
Right.
So let's stay with the criminal end of things here for 1 second. So constitutionally, is there anything that says either yes or no that a sitting president can be prosecuted criminally?
No, there's nothing constitutionally that says yes or no, and we've not had such a prosecution. We've had civil litigation against a president, namely President Clinton. We remember the Paula Jones matter.
And the Supreme Court came out, and it surprised a lot of people, saying essentially what?
Saying essentially that you can bring civil litigation against a president. We've not had criminal prosecution against a sitting president, and there's really no precedent for it. But that doesn't mean that you cannot prosecute in criminal court a president for obstruction of justice. And the question, the suggestion, we don't have a king, Jack.
Right.
We have a president of the United States.
And it used to be one of the things we decided we're not going to have is the king can do no wrong theory.
Precisely. And the suggestion by an attorney, this attorney, that this president would be above obstruction of justice charges by any attorney is quite troubling to me, and I think is troubling to a lot of legal analysts.
Give me an encapsulated argument that could be made in terms of what we've seen here, the tweet, the suggestion that the president knew what Flynn had done, and he was pressuring the head of the FBI to basically to tank this, make this go away. What's the argument as to how that could constitute obstruction of justice?
Well, you need more than just the tweet or even the meeting with then Director Comey. But the fact is that we already have it seems, an acknowledgement by the president that he knew his then national security advisor lied to the FBI. And then we waited as an administration to fire the man. Then we pressure the FBI director to go easy on him. I hope. The question is, what is the meaning of hope? I hope you can see the meeting Comey testifies, the president says to him, I hope you can go easy on him. Now, the president says, well, that just means I'm hoping. But Comey took it as I'm being pressured by the president of the United States in a private meeting, which in and of itself is problematic, not to pursue this investigation, which takes us back to Congress's definition of obstruction, interfering with or impeding an investigation that is ongoing of this president and his transition team, and Mike Flynn, who has now pleaded guilty.
So the defense would be, and I think you articulated here, essentially, look, intent is essential here.
Yes.
And you said that the defense would be, look, I'm just offering an opinion as opposed to a direction. Is that what you'd anticipate?
That is correct. And that's why I don't think, Jack, the tweet in and of itself is enough, or even perhaps the meeting, which, let's remind everyone, Comey made contemporaneous notes of that meeting at the time, which he gave to his staff. Those were then leaked to the media. So it's not just Comey's memory of the meeting and he said statement. But I don't think the meeting and the tweet alone would be enough. There would be other evidence needed, but suspicion starts to be stronger that that evidence may be there because now we have Mike Flynn cooperating with the Mueller investigation.
That'll be real curious. You and I have been on both sides as prosecutors and defense attorneys. And whenever you hear cooperation, obviously the antenna goes up. Last question for you, and going back to John Dowd's position, saying that, look, the president of the United States is the head of the executive branch. True.
Yes.
As a consequence, you can say chief law enforcement officer because they are the head of that part of this is the argument, at least, that part of the executive, that the Justice Department. So my question to you is does that make sense to you that the president basically has the right as chief law enforcement officer to say make that case go away?
No, the president is not above the law. I think whatever your political persuasion, whatever your party, the president would never be above the law. That's what our constitutional system is founded upon. That's the principle of our constitutional system. And so certainly he's the chief executive officer, but the notion that obstruction charges couldn't apply to the president or other criminal murder? I mean, are we going to suggest that a president...
But the president said, don't prosecute. We're theoretical now, not President Trump. But the president say, okay, I committed an act of bribery, but make it go away because I'm the president.
Think about war crimes. I mean, all kinds of things that a president certainly should be subject to if facts were to come out in the course of the presidency.
It was a bit of a stretch, that position.
And one other thing we should raise is the notion that this lawyer suggested he himself wrote this tweet only muddies the waters and complicates the conversation. It's, I think...
It doesn't suggest really good lawyering if he did.
It suggests terribly poor lawyering, whether he wrote the tweet, drafted the tweet, advised the tweet. It's all bad. And I think the Mueller investigation needs to proceed apace so that we can get some clarity about what really went on.
Well, clarity is the important issue here, but I can say that our viewers have some clarity now. It's a consequence of our conversation. So. Jamie, you always do such a wonderful job explaining this.
Good to be here.
It's always so good to see you.
Good to see you, Jack.
And we'll get you back in as this continues, I'm sure.
It will continue.
It will. You be well.
Thank you.